I sent a simple birthday text, aching that no one had remembered me. My son's reply cut deep. "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore." His wife even pressed like on that message, sealing the wound. I blocked them, and with it, their access to the family fortune they'd been quietly draining. The real story was only just beginning. Before I share it, tell me, how are you doing today? 66 candles never made it onto a cake that night, but I baked one anyway. My Park Avenue apartment felt too big for just me, yet I moved through it with practiced motions. The chocolate sponge cooled on the counter while traffic hummed outside. I set one plate, polished fork, and a folded napkin at the end of the table, as if expecting company that never showed. My hands ached from arthritis, but kneading and frosting gave me something to do besides notice the silence. The phone lay face down until I flipped it, expecting at least a single "Happy Birthday, Mom." Nothing, only weather alerts and spam promising discounts. I looked again at the cake and thought about Robert, gone these many years, how he'd always sung the same off-key tune while I cut the first slice. I whispered to myself, 66 isn't invisible, and felt the truth of it. At my age, silence teaches me who's standing with me and who's standing on me. The hurt sat heavy, yet I refused to wallow. I drafted a text, plain and measured. "I felt sad today. No one reached out. The cake's here if you want a slice." I typed it twice, deleted the harsher version that wanted to leap out, then pressed send to the family thread. My son Darius, his wife I sold, and the rest would see it. No begging, no dramatics, just naming the wound. I set the phone on the table, screen up this time, daring myself to face whatever response arrived. I cracked the window for a little breeze, listened to a taxi hiss by, smelled cocoa and vanilla filling the apartment. Grief was still tucked in a corner, the same grief that watched Robert's chair stay empty every year. Naming the hurt isn't weakness, it's the map out of it. The reply came quicker than I imagined. My screen lit with Darius's name, 3 dots flickering before the words appeared. "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore." I read it once, then again, trying to match the son I remembered with the message on the screen. His toddler laugh echoed in my mind, the way he once held tight to my leg at kindergarten, begging me not to leave. Now here he was, sending me away with a single line. I muttered under my breath, "Well, I'll be. That's a horse of a different color." No paragraphs, no begging him back. I closed the thread, opened my notes app, and listed what was still mine. Peace, pension, property, patience. A boundary is love with a backbone. I didn't call. I didn't text again. I covered the cake with a glass dome and left one slice out, not as an invitation, but as closure. In this country, we have a saying, "I don't chase grown folks." I pulled out a yellow legal pad, jotting names, dates, and numbers. Paper becomes memory when people fail you. I checked the stove, the locks, and whispered a prayer. "God, keep me from smallness." Dignity is the quiet you earn after you stop explaining yourself. When I finally placed the phone on my dresser in the other room, it buzzed once more, just a faint tremor. I let it buzz. The apartment grew so still I could hear my own breath, steady and calm, stronger than before. By morning, the city had washed its face, and so had I. I drew back the blinds and let the sunlight in, refusing to sit in shadows that weren't of my making. I made oatmeal, stirred in a spoonful of honey, and poured black coffee into the chipped mug Robert once favored. I gave myself a rule: no responses, no messages, not until I'd done 3 simple chores. First, fold the laundry I'd left in the basket. Second, water the houseplants. Third, write the date on a fresh page of my yellow legal pad. A little order pushes back chaos. Only then did I turn the phone on. Notifications flooded like junk mail in an old mailbox. I told myself what my grandmother used to say. Peace isn't passive, it's a decision you remake every hour. The family thread sat waiting, bright and merciless. Darius's words from last night stared back. We need space. Please don't reach out. I thought maybe I'd misread it. Maybe exhaustion had painted it colder than it was. But there beneath his message sat a small blue thumbs up from Isolde. A single tap of her finger, neat as a signature, a little brand burned onto my skin. That like wasn't casual, it was confirmation. I pictured her in her polished kitchen, stone counters gleaming, hair smooth, children lined up like props for the perfect life she curated. She didn't need to raise her voice, she only needed that thumbprint. I didn't screenshot, didn't forward to anyone. Instead, I wrote in my pad, "They agree on a version of me that requires removal." And I remembered something Maya Angelou once said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." A call from downstairs startled me. The concierge announced a courier with a bouquet. When I opened the door, I found white lilies, lush and heavy, tied with cream ribbon, card tucked on top. From your loving family. The handwriting looked like something printed in a catalog. I thanked the young man, pressed a tip into his hand, and carried the vase inside. The fragrance was thick, almost like a funeral parlor. I set it beside the cake dome, uneasy, and that's when a slip of paper fluttered out, a receipt, billing the arrangement to my own Viva. The last 4 digits were mine. My chest tightened. They hadn't even bothered to cover their tracks. "If you buy the apology," I murmured, "you're the stagehand, not the audience." I dialed the florist, voice calm but firm. The clerk pulled up the order, account in my name, authorized contact listed as Isolde. The payment card, the one I recognized, had been charged. I asked the clerk to remove it immediately. She hesitated until I said, "Please give me a confirmation number." My tone was warm, but it had an edge sharpened by years of ushering men twice my size down church aisles without raising my voice. When she read back the number, I wrote it in neat ink. Facts are armor. I decided to call Darius, not for comfort, but for clarity. He answered with a crisp politeness, the kind you'd use with a stranger. "Mom, I don't manage that stuff," he said, when I asked about the flowers. I reminded him the florist account named Isolde, and the charges had been reversed. His sigh came through the line, impatient, as though I'd interrupted a meeting. "We're busy, Mom." I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Then let's not perform," ended the call myself. Clarity is kinder than a dozen delayed apologies. Afterward, I opened my laptop, checked each account, scrubbed away old profiles where my card had been stored. I set up alerts, changed passwords, and scheduled a consult with Alaric Bone for later in the week. Nothing dramatic, just maintenance, like a woman sweeping her porch before sunset. I made myself a sandwich, then drew 2 columns in my pad, what I control and what I release. Finances, front door, calendar, I listed under control. Their stories about me, the versions they sell to themselves, that I placed under release. You don't need permission to step out of a story that misuses your name. By late afternoon, I tidied the flowers, turned the ribbon toward the wall, and snapped the cake dome shut. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with a calendar invite I never created. Family check-in, optional, Sunday, 5 p.m., Westchester. Sent by Isolde. No message attached. I tapped maybe, slid the florist receipt behind the card, and wrote a single word on my pad. Evidence. The invite sat there like bait, and I was done nibbling. By Friday, my list had edges, dates, receipts, and a column I could lean on. I sat at my desk with the legal pad in front of me, 2 columns staring back, what I control and what I release. I added more entries to each side, tightening the lines as if drawing fences around a garden. On one page, I wrote down every vendor, every auto payment, every account that might have been misused. On another, I listed the alerts I needed to activate before the weekend. I scheduled a Monday call with Alaric Boone, my trustee contact, and drafted pointed questions about instructions and access. I slipped receipts and screenshots into a slim folder, lined up neatly beside my laptop. Then I turned to the cake dome still on the counter, set it firmly in place, and whispered, "Preparation is what courage looks like on paper." With my notes ready, I opened the trust portal. I went line by line, precise as a surgeon. The tuition drafts, mortgage support, discretionary cards, all toggled to suspended. Every action dated, every change documented for Alaric to review. I typed into the trustee notes, "Temporary suspension due to fiduciary concerns. Council review scheduled." No emotion, just facts carved in digital stone. I sent Alaric a short email. "Status updated as discussed. Documentation attached. Monday works." Then I reached for my phone, setting Do Not Disturb from 7 at night until 7 in the morning, exceptions only for medical and building numbers. I reminded myself, I don't raise my voice, I raise my standards. At 7:32 p.m., the first tremor came. Darius calling. I let it ring out, the hum of the city filling the silence instead. Seconds later, a text flashed. "Mom, the mortgage autopay bounced. Is your bank okay?" The words wore a mask of concern, but the timing revealed panic. I flipped the phone face down, rinsed a wine glass, and let water run steady over my hands. The second call buzzed, then a third from an unfamiliar suburban number. I muted them both, wrote a line on my pad. Boundary in effect, 7:30 p.m. Silence is not absence, it's authorship. By 9 o'clock, their messages piled like storm clouds. First confusion, then pressure. "Call me back. There's a mistake. Answer your phone." I skimmed the transcripts, each more frantic than the last. One voicemail read like a man drowning. "Mom, pick up. This is urgent. The bank." Another from Isolde sharpened into command. "We need to talk now." But I noted timestamps, not please. I refused to let urgency pretend to be intimacy. I brewed chamomile tea, cracked the window, and listened to the sirens fade 2 blocks away. My apartment held my heartbeat steady. I laid walking shoes by the door for morning, a reminder that my steps belong to me. Let urgency knock, you don't owe it a key. Near midnight, the lock screen glowed with dozens of missed calls. The text bent from sharp to strangely sweet, cycling through every stage of bargaining. I powered the phone down, slid it into my dresser drawer, and placed my folder by the door with my keys. I checked the oven, the balcony latch, and the chain on the front door. These rituals steadied me. I whispered into the quiet, no more performing pain on cue. I turned off the kitchen light, listened to the city breathe, and matched its rhythm. Just before sleep, the screen lit inside the drawer. One last vibration, then went still like a held breath. I took the subway to Midtown with a folder that felt heavier than paper. The morning air pressed against me, thick with August heat, but inside Alaric Boone's office, the air was steady and cool. I set the folder on his desk, receipts, screenshots, dates, and my careful ledger of transfers. He leafed through it, nodding slowly, then looked up. "There have been inquiries about guardianship," he said, voice even. "Mailed here weeks ago. Return address from Westchester." My stomach tightened. The story was clear. Paint me as incapacitated, then swoop in with authority. Alaric explained the threshold. They'd need proof of confusion, patterns of reckless spending, anything they could dress up as decline. I leaned back, folding my hands. Then we leave no room for fiction. He drafted a memo, stamped with today's date. Temporary fiduciary pause pending review. It was policy, not plea. In a storm, a good map beats a brave guess. I authorized Alaric to notify the trustee immediately. No emotion, only facts. We set a 6-month audit window, tracing every draft, links to Westchester, every autopay tied to their address. I stepped into the lobby and dialed Narita Cross, a sharp attorney I trusted. My words were clipped. Check if Darius or Isolde have filed consults. Look for drafts of a petition. I forwarded her the timeline I had built, and within minutes she replied with her plan. Courthouse searches, bank liaisons, community statements. I added a note in my pad. Narratives are cheap, records are expensive. Buy the latter. Paper remembers what people tried to forget. Midweek, I walked into the church fellowship hall in Queens. The smell of sheet cake and coffee hit me, familiar and grounding. During Bible study break, a friend leaned close. "Honey, they've been saying you're slipping." She whispered the phrases. Impulsive spending, unsafe with money, distant from reality. Each word echoed what Alaric had warned. My cheeks burned, but I thanked her instead of flaring. "Would you write the date and what you heard?" She scribbled on a napkin, her hand trembling. I folded it, a small affidavit marked with crumbs. Gossip kneels like worship and cuts like wire. I stepped outside, let the cool air sting my eyes, then texted Narita, add church statements to timeline. Steel settled where hurt had been. That night, back at my apartment, I spread everything across my desk. The napkin, the memo, the receipts, all scanned and labeled neatly. I created a log, times, calls, invitations. Nothing interpretive, just fact stacked on fact. I scheduled a baseline neurocognitive evaluation with a Manhattan clinician, not because I doubted myself, but proof beats rumor. Online, I updated trustee settings, dual signature required for any unusual withdrawals, with Alaric's memo attached. I brewed a cup of decaf, placed the choir fund envelope by the door for Sunday, and let myself breathe. Don't argue the rumor, outlive it on paper. Later that week, my phone buzzed with another invite. Family check-in, optional. The wording hadn't changed. A church friend sent me a screenshot too. I sold praising family unity and courageous caretaking in a mom's group. I filed it under public posturing and set my alarm for early. Tomorrow belonged to banks and boundaries. Before bed, I turned the bouquet of lilies so the ribbon faced the wall. Beauty is not proof. Proof is what wins. When folks rehearse their goodness in public, check what they're staging backstage. I clicked off the kitchen light. The city hummed outside, and I could hear the pattern behind it now. By morning, it wouldn't be whispers and posts, it would be signatures and timestamps. I was at the branch door when the manager flipped the sign to open. The air conditioning inside was brisk, almost unfriendly, but I welcomed it after the heat on the street. I handed over my ID and trustee documents, keeping my voice polite but steady. I'd like a 6-month printout of every transaction tied to my accounts. The clerk disappeared into the back, and within minutes, the records landed in front of me, pages thick with numbers. My eyes caught the pattern quickly. Payments to Westchester utilities, SUV leases, club dues, and school fees. All tied to my money, none with my signature. The manager leaned forward, lowering his tone. There have also been repeated requests for joint oversight on these accounts, but we've held them, pending your approval. I signed every form he slid across the desk, locking access, activating alerts, leaving a trail no one could erase. This isn't about money, I told him. It's about integrity. A ledger can't love you, but it won't lie to you either. Back home, I spread the statements across the dining table. Each charge glared back at me. Club memberships I'd never stepped foot in, car notes I'd never driven, tuition fees I'd never signed for. The pattern sharpened as I highlighted line after line. Charges spiking before holidays, shrinking after. Not sloppy mistakes, deliberate timing to mask indulgence. My irritation burned, but I let it cool into clarity. I wrote a memo in bold block letters. Beneficiaries exploiting discretionary access without disclosure. Then I slipped everything into a binder marked Bank Trail 2023. Numbers may not hug you, but they will hold you accountable. By late afternoon, another fire started. A friend texted me screenshots from a community group. Isolde had posted a long message about her exhausting managing her mother-in-law's decline. Comments flooded in, praising her strength, sending hearts and prayers. I read each line twice, my lips pressed tight. She wasn't just dipping into accounts. She was building a stage, casting me as the frail old woman, while she played the heroine. I saved every screenshot, dated them, and slid them into a new folder labeled Public Narrative. I shook my head and muttered, "If you want applause, buy a ticket, not my reputation." When lies take the stage, facts have to sell tickets too. That evening, I called Narita Cross. My voice was firm, not frantic. I walked her through the bank records, then the screenshots. She listened, then sighed. The narrative is spreading beyond the church. PTA meetings, fundraisers, even coffee groups. We mapped our next steps together. Affidavits from witnesses, financial misuse logs, court-ready evidence. Truth in pieces is gossip, she reminded me. Truth in a binder is evidence. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and said, "Then we'll keep binding. Don't wrestle a rumor, document it until it can't run." I ended the night stacking the binders, Bank Trail 2023, Public Narrative, and Narita's notes. I slipped them into the filing cabinet, locked it, and hung the small key around my neck. My phone buzzed again, screen glowing with a group text invite. Emergency family discussion, mandatory attendance. The language was sharp, not a suggestion, but an order. I sat back, let the phone buzz itself quiet, then wrote one last line on my pad. Mandatory for them, optional for me. Power shifts quietly, one receipt at a time. Their demand sat on my phone, but my answer was locked in a cabinet under key. By Sunday, the so-called family meeting had all the trappings of a trial. I pulled into their driveway and saw the glow of candles already flickering through the window. Inside, the dining table stretched long, dressed with good china and crystal. My name card sat at the far end, not so close I could lead, but close enough for the camera to catch my face. The kitchen gleamed like a magazine spread, and two phones rested on shelves, their lenses pointed square at the table. Darius greeted me with corporate civility, his handshake dry as paper. Isolde's smile was bright but rehearsed, the kind you use for Christmas cards, not kin. I smoothed my jacket, folded my napkin, and let my eyes mark every exit. Politeness without respect is furniture, nice to look at, indifferent to your weight. Isolde chirped as she arranged a teapot. "We're just doing a little family check-in for memories." At that, Darius tapped a phone and the red recording dot blinked awake. She slid a cup of tea toward me only while the lens faced our side of the table. When the camera turned, the cup vanished, quietly placed back on the tray. Her generosity moved on cue, not conviction. I answered their soft prompts with complete sentences, but offered nothing they could twist. No confession of frailty, no slip of confusion. Caspian, sweet but too aware, asked if we could do a group hug on video. The request landed heavy in my chest. I tilted my chair so the camera caught my calm, not my compliance. A camera can't film sincerity. It only records choreography. On my way to the restroom, Seraphine tugged my sleeve. Her whisper was small, but it split the night wide open. "Grandma, Dad said we just have to act nice until we get the money." Her eyes watered, ashamed for a scheme she hadn't built. I bent low, smoothed her hair, and said softly, "You told me the truth. That's what brave people do." She asked if honesty was wrong. "No, baby, honesty isn't betrayal when the lie is the rule." I memorized her exact words, the time, the place. Darius called from the dining room. "We're waiting on you." The play needed its reluctant star. I squeezed her hand before I stepped back into the lights. You don't betray a family by telling the truth. You betray it by asking a child to lie. Back at the table, Isolde raised a glass. "To healing," she declared, eyes darting to the nearest lens. She nudged a folded document near my plate, calling it a simple form for shared decisions. My eyes skimmed the header sideways, guardianship language dressed up as care. I placed my hand on the paper and slid it back across the table. All legal matters go through counsel, not dinner. Darius leaned forward, jaw tight. Mom, it's just routine. I looked him square. Routine is brushing your teeth. Legal authority is what you don't get without me. Isolde's smile faltered, but she pressed again. Maybe just a quick statement for the video. I folded my napkin and smiled back, the way a judge says denied. You don't mend a wound with wallpaper. I rose, thanked them for dinner, and fixed my gaze on the nearest lens. Any further conversations will happen with attorneys present. Darius blinked, his mouth tightening. Isolde's teeth stayed bared in that frozen grin. The red light kept blinking, proof gathering proof. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message from Narita Cross. Update, call me when clear. Another from Alaric Bone. Documents ready. Seraphine's small nod as I turned told me she understood the side of truth she'd chosen. Near the door, I spotted another camera glowing faintly, still recording my back. I paused just long enough to let the lens know I'd seen it. If your love needs an audience, you're running a show, not a home. On my way down the stone steps, Narita's text expanded. Found something. You'll want to see it tonight. Narita spread the files on my coffee table like cards that only read one word. Proof. Her folders were neat and labeled. Bank trail, public narrative, event footage, church statements. I sat with my knees pulled close, eyes tracing each page. She explained how bank account queries matched dates from Darius and Isolde's staged check-in. She showed me attorney lookups done in their names, trying to sketch my life as decline. I added my florist receipt and that crumpled napkin from the church, my handwriting beside coffee stains. Every piece got logged, dated, and scanned into my laptop. Together, we built a clean timeline. No opinions, just facts that couldn't blush or forget. Narita looked at me and said, "If you can't carry the truth in your mouth, carry it in your binder." I nodded, steadying myself. From my desk drawer, I pulled a thick cream envelope. We stacked inside the essentials. Narita's summary, the highlighted bank records, screenshots of Isolde's sympathy-seeking posts, the whisper written on that napkin, the florist slip. On top, I placed a cover letter. For clarity and record, all further matters via counsel. I slipped in the letter confirming my upcoming neurocognitive evaluation, my quiet strike against their lies. I initialed each page bottom right. Narita photographed every set. Redundancy wasn't fear, it was wisdom. I sealed 2 identical envelopes, one for the meeting, one for my safe, and slid a third into a mailer addressed to Alaric Bone's office. Strategy is anger taught to read. The next afternoon, Alaric ushered us into a glass-walled conference room. Darius leaned back like a man auditioning for calm, Isolde crossing her ankles in polished control. Alaric set ground rules, one at a time, all statements on record, nothing without counsel. Isolde spoke first, rehearsed lines dripping concern. "We just want shared decisions for Mom's well-being." Darius followed, eyes avoiding mine. She's been impulsive with funds. I let them finish, then slid my envelope across the table. Alaric nodded, invited them to read. Bank statements, screenshots, napkin notes, all laid bare. I placed my evaluation letter next to their elbows, a brick on their fragile glass. My voice was calm. "This is the record that contradicts your story." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. The loudest thing in a room of liars is a date stamp. Isolde stammered that her posts were misunderstood. Darius muttered about not handling that stuff, though his email sat printed in black and white on inquiry slips. Alaric's voice was clipped but polite. Any false guardianship claims with financial gain at stake can qualify as exploitation. Darius clenched his jaw. Isolde smoothed her skirt. I leaned forward. From now on, every conversation goes through counsel. No forms, no cameras, no narratives I didn't write. Isolde asked, her smile cracking, "Are we really making this legal?" I answered, "You did, the moment you tried to make me small on paper." Respect isn't a feeling, it's a paper trail. Out in the corridor, Darius caught me. His voice was flat, stripped of performance. "Mom, this could all look bad." I met his eyes. "It already does. That's why we wrote it down." He mumbled about tuition, about mortgage payments. I told him, steady as stone, "Work with your wife. Work with your job, not with my pity." Isolde appeared, smile thin as a thread. "Maybe we can start fresh," she offered, her glance sliding to Alaric's notary plaque gleaming by the door. I didn't shake her hand. I nodded once, turned toward the elevator. Closure isn't a scene, it's a stance. In the mirrored wall, I saw myself, unbent, unowned by any camera. Back in the conference room, Alaric set a notary stamp beside a new stack of papers and said, "Whenever you're ready." I signed once for the charity, once for the trust revision, and once for my own piece. The notary's pen scratched quietly as Alaric Boone guided me through each tabbed page. I read every clause aloud: the revocation of discretionary access, the 30-day occupancy notice for the Westchester house, the no contest provision set like iron. Alaric paused to confirm each line, ensuring nothing could be twisted later. I declined any staggered stipends. Generosity had already been misused. This wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. When I pressed my initials into the margin, I felt the weight shift from my shoulders to the paper. A will can move money. A boundary moves a life. Alaric's assistant prepared certified letters, each sealed with acknowledgement slips. One to Darius, one to Isolde, copies for the trustee and the bank. A process server was scheduled for hand delivery, courtesy on the surface, compliance underneath. Trustee emails were queued with read receipts, the digital footprint to match the paper trail. Even my brokerage accounts mirrored the new instructions. By the time I left Alaric's office, a stamped copy rested in my bag. It was only a few sheets of paper, yet it carried the weight of a verdict. If respect won't come to your door, send it a letter that requires a signature. Back home, my phone buzzed. Seraphine's text glowed soft against the screen. "Grandma, I'm proud of you. I didn't know being honest could feel like breathing." I sat down slowly, tears welling but not falling. I wrote back, "The truth doesn't need an apology. It just needs companions." She answered with a heart and a line about choir practice, ordinary and sweet. I screenshotted the thread, filed it in a folder named Hope. Some evidence protects, some evidence heals. Mercy without boundaries feeds entitlement. Mercy with truth raises children. By evening, the noise came. Missed calls stacked up. Texts spilled across the screen. "How could you? This is extreme. We're family." Each word rang hollow, spent before it reached me. I forwarded them to Alaric's office. No commentary, just timestamps. He replied with his usual precision. Noted, logged. Online, their sympathy posts began to wobble as my records circulated. I brewed tea, watered my plant, and slid the revised trust binder onto the shelf next to hymnals. Tradition and protection belonged side by side. I cut a small slice of chocolate cake, ate half, and smiled at the thought. Some rituals stay sweet when corrected. Kindness isn't credit. You don't get to roll it over after you've spent it on lies. As dusk fell, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote one final check to a scholarship fund in Robert's name. A new tradition entered the room, quiet but unshakable. I set a place for one at the table, not lonely but whole. I texted the building manager to schedule a shredding pickup. My life needed only clean paper now. Looking out at Park Avenue, I thought people crossing streets, carrying groceries, laughing into phones, ordinary decency unfolding at walking speed. I turned the bouquet so the ribbon finally faced the room. Beauty and truth were no longer at odds. Freedom isn't loud. It's the sound of a lock clicking from the inside. Some doors I closed with a pen. The rest I opened with my own hands.